why bother investigating animal cruelty? It includes both felony and misdemeanor crimes, concern for the animals, and it can also lead to the discovery of other criminal activity. And the laws are found in the agriculture and market law. They used to be in the penal law. It used to be called the Penal Code. And back in the early 60s, I believe it was, they took the laws out of the Penal Code and they put them in Ag and Markets. And anyway, in spite of that, the law does state under Section 371 that a constable or police officer must, and any agent or officer of an SPCA may, arrest, summon, and arrest or issue an appearance ticket to any person offending against any of the provisions of Article 26. Now, what this means is a police officer has no choice. We must make arrests for animal cruelty. It doesn't say we can't, we can, or we might, or we may. It says we must. SPCAs are private organizations. They are not funded by the state or the federal government. They are not mandated, therefore, by law to make arrests for animal cruelty. They may make an arrest. Some SPCAs in New York State don't even have cruelty investigators. So they have no obligation to make an arrest for animal cruelty. Dog control officers by New York State law, every town must have a dog control officer. They're not mandated to have an animal control officer. A dog control officer has the duty of picking up stray dogs and picking up dangerous dogs. They are not mandated to investigate animal cruelty. They have no legal authority to go out and make arrests for animal cruelty. They don't get any training on how to conduct an investigation in animal cruelty, and these are all crimes, misdemeanors and felonies. So what it comes down to is the police must handle these crimes. We must take the lead. We can call the SPCA for assistance, and we can call the dog control officers or animal control officers. And in most cases, that's what we have to do. We have to all work together. But basically speaking, it is our duty as police to handle these cases. And the definitions, there's a few things that you really have to understand in the agriculture and market law. I'm not going to cover every section because we'd be here till midnight. But you do need to know what the definitions of animal cruelty are. And for the sake of this law, an animal is every living creature except a human being. This law does not protect humans, although we are animals. And the definition of torture or cruelty includes every act, every omission, and every neglect that we can cause to every animal. Any unjustifiable killing, beating, burning, hanging, shooting, or any other act to every animal, whether wild or domesticated. We protect wildlife under the New York State agriculture and market law. We have the legal right to do that. We have a legal mandate to do that. Every omission, everything that you can think of, it's not just giving them food and water, and every neglect, and that is the definition of animal cruelty. Now, you can get a copy of the law under the New York State Humane Association website. It's nyshumane.org. And if you Google that, the law will come up, the complete law, Article 26, and you will see this definition. And it's every act, every omission, and every neglect whereby any unjustifiable physical pain, suffering, or death is caused or permitted. So what does that mean? Well, sometimes we cause physical pain to animals for justifiable reasons. For food, hunting causes physical pain. Slaughterhouses cause a lot of physical pain. And there's a lot of other things that we sometimes have to do to protect ourselves against animals. And these things are justified. But if it cannot be justified, then it is either a misdemeanor or a felony crime. And again, for the definitions, a farm animal includes any ungulate, hoofed animal, poultry, sheep, swine, goats, llamas, horses, and any fur-bearing animals, as described in the conservation law, which are raised for commercial or subsistence purposes. That is a farm animal. So, are farm animals domesticated animals? Yes, they are. They're not wildlife. They are domesticated. And domestication means thousands of years of being selectively bred by people for certain things, either to be food or our companions or clothing. A companion animal includes every dog or cat. Every cat is a companion animal, whether it's a stray, whether it's feral. If it was born under somebody's porch and never had any human contact, it's still a companion animal by law. And all cats are domesticated. If a cat had kittens out in the middle of the woods, and even though they might act feral, they are still domesticated animals. A companion animal is any other domesticated animal normally maintained in or near the household of the owner or person who cares for such domesticated animal. So the section that you need to know for probably 95% of your cases is Article 26, Section 353, which is a Class A misdemeanor. And what it states is that it's a misdemeanor to overload, overdrive, torture, cruelly beat, unjustifiably, injure, maim, mutilate, or kill any animal, whether wild or tame. So it includes wild animals, any animal, and whether belonging to himself or to another person, or failure to provide proper sustenance, food or drink. And the one paragraph that nobody takes into consideration is the last paragraph in this law. And it says, any person who furthers any cruelty, which we know the definition of cruelty is any act, omission, or neglect. Any person who furthers any cruelty or any act that would tend to produce such cruelty is guilty of a misdemeanor. So you don't even have to have animal cruelty. All you have to know is that somebody is doing something that could possibly produce cruelty at some point. And I will give you some examples of this law. Now, 353 says any person who overloads, overdrives, unjustifiably injures, maims, beats, mutilates, or kills any animal. Overloading was a law that was actually introduced to protect horses. However, there's nothing that says you can't use it for other things. This dog was found in the city of Albany. It's a little pit bull, and he's got a logging chain wrapped around his neck and a padlock, which is weighting his neck down. It's causing suffering. If not causing it immediately, it would cause suffering. This actually is an example of overloading. This dog was brought to the Humane Society a long time ago. And when the owner came in to retrieve the dog, we arrested him for animal cruelty, for overloading the dog. And he didn't get the dog back. This is another example of overloading. Obviously, this man is way too heavy for this little pony. He's riding it around in this field. You can tell just by the expression on this pony that he's not happy. When horses are upset, their ears will be pinned back like this one is. And it's much too much weight, and this would be another example of overloading an animal. Cruelly beating, there's no reason to hit a dog. There's no reason, especially to smack him in the face with a newspaper. But the police responded to a domestic dispute, and while they were there, they saw the dog. The wife said her husband beat the dog also, in addition to beating her. So the police, in addition to charging this man with assault, they charged him for animal cruelty, for beating the dog in the face with a newspaper. Unjustifiable injury. This was a wild mallard duck swimming around in a pond, and some teenage boys got a hold of it. They tied his bill shut. They impaled him with nails and put nails into his eyes. It was just a fun thing for them to do on a Sunday afternoon. Even though this is a wild animal, the police were called, and they rescued this mallard duck, arrested these teenage boys under 353. They couldn't arrest them with the felony because it's a wild animal, and the felony only applies to companion animals. But at least they got arrested. And when somebody does something like this, kids, they should be arrested. It should be noted. Kids that do things like this have a problem. And if it's not stopped, they will go on to do more bad things, maybe to hurt people at some point. Failure to provide proper sustenance. I get a lot of calls about horses. I used to train horses. I owned them for over 30 years, and the troopers called me about this horse. It was out in a field, and it wasn't getting fed, and they responded. The trooper that went there knew a lot about horses, and he told the owner that the horse is extremely emaciated. The owner said, well, he's got grass to eat, and I give him hay sometimes. I give her, it was a mare, I give her grain once in a while, and the trooper said, you're not feeding her enough. And he goes, well, actually, it was my wife's horse, and we split up, and, I'm just doing the best I can with it. And he said, if you want it, take it. So the troopers called me, and I went with my horse trailer and picked this mare up. And even though she was 23 years old, this is how she looked 2 months later when she was at my barn. So horses need to be fed, and if they're losing weight, there's a number of things that can go wrong with them. Usually it's not old age. Usually they're not getting fed enough. That's one good indication as to why they're losing weight. They might be in a yard with other horses, and sometimes horses, they establish control. Certain ones won't let the other ones eat, and so they have to be separated. The quality of food isn't good. They might be getting moldy hay, and horses won't eat it. They might need their teeth. They call it floating. Every year or so, I would have the vet come and float my horse's teeth. they can't chew properly. They're not going to be able to swallow hay. And even though there's hay out there, they're not going to eat it. So all of these things have to be checked with horses, and they will live to be in their 30s if they are cared for properly. So what the law says is any person who furthers any act of cruelty or any act that would tend to produce cruelty is guilty of a misdemeanor. So other examples of animal cruelty include collars embedded into dogs' necks, rain rot, overgrown hooves, lack of vet care. Now, this was a dog up in Clifton Park, and the troopers responded to a domestic dispute there. While they were there, they noticed the dog that was outside, tied on a chain. Its neck was all red. And so one of the troopers went out and checked on it, and this is what she found. And she felt that she had exigent circumstances to take this animal, because what happened was one of the teenagers that lived in the house took the collar off, put a thick rubber band around the dog's neck, and then put the collar back on. And so the rubber band was wearing into the dog's neck, and nobody in the family thought to check on this, even though they, they knew that there was something wrong because there was blood around the dog's neck. So this would be animal cruelty. Allowing a collar to grow into a dog's neck would be considered neglect, a misdemeanor crime. Sarcoptic mange, his beagle was found on a farm and covered with mange. Mange is extremely painful to animals, highly contagious. People can get it from their pets, usually animals that are kept outside in filth and dirt, not fed properly, not cared for. They can pick up mange. They can pick it up from wild animals. Foxes get it. The owner didn't want to relinquish custody. Neighbors were complaining about this dog, so the police went and got a search warrant and seized the animal. Overgrown toenails might not be a misdemeanor crime by itself, but it is very painful, and usually if you find neglected dogs, this is something that you will see. And it's a dog's toenails need to be cut, or it will cause extreme pain under some circumstances. Wild dogs like wolves and coyotes, they run in the wild and they wear their toenails down. When we have animals in captivity, domesticated animals, they aren't doing what nature would intend them to do, and we have to compensate for that and take care of them. Extreme matting in dogs. If you have a long-haired dog, a lot of times a puppy mill will have dogs in these conditions. This is extremely painful for a dog. This is before and after. An extremely matted dog, the fur will actually pull on their skin and cause a lot of pain and suffering. And this would be included in your information, your accusatory instrument. If you had a case where animals were in bad conditions, you would state that they are suffering from dehydration, emaciation, overgrown toenails, extremely matted fur, and so on. An example of rain rot in horses: all animals need shelter. In the wild, animals, they might stand out in the snow. They might stand in a snowstorm, whatever. But wild animals will find places to get shelter. They'll go in holes in the ground. They go in holes in the trees. The deer will go in heavy brush. Wild horses will band together. But if you have a horse in a small field and there is no structure for them to get under, and all they really need is a three-sided structure, They don't need a barn. They don't need to be closed in. They need something to get out of the freezing rain and the wind. Otherwise, they will often end up like this with a disease called rain rot, where their skin will actually start to slough off them. This horse was up north in the Adirondacks, and I got a call about him. He was tied in a stall for 8 years, never allowed outside, never had his hooves trimmed. You can see his hooves are like 14 inches long. And so one of the workers on this farm called the police, and they responded, and they did make the guy get the horse's hooves cut, but they didn't want to arrest him. They didn't think that this was animal cruelty. They couldn't find anywhere in the law that it talked about the necessity to cut a horse's hooves. Well, there isn't anything that says that, just like all the other things we just discussed. But it's any act or any neglect that causes suffering. And so if you were to write an information for any of these things, you would just write, instead of the penal law, it would be the agriculture and market law in violation of Section 353. Any person who fails to provide proper sustenance or in any way furthers any act of cruelty is guilty of a misdemeanor. And cruelty is any act, omission, or neglect. And at the aforementioned time and date, the owner did keep a horse that had extremely overgrown hooves, providing no farrier care, resulting in extreme pain and suffering. So they're basically the same as the penal law informations. So a person who furthers any act of cruelty or any act tending to produce cruelty is guilty of a misdemeanor. There's nothing in the law that says you can't carry a horse in the back, a dog in the back of a pickup truck. However, it could produce cruelty. I worked on the New York State Thruway. I have seen dogs that have jumped out of the back of pickup trucks. They weren't secured properly. I've seen them go flying out when the truck hit its brakes. This guy was going up 890 in Schenectady. He had a load of logs in the back of the truck. This Labrador Retriever was in front of the logs. They weren't secured in any way back there. Now, if he stepped on the brake all of a sudden, what's going to happen? These logs are going to go forward and crush this animal. Or he could jump out. If he jumps out on 890, it could cause an accident, and the dog is going to be dead. So any act that would tend to produce cruelty. When you're conducting an investigation from start to finish, you have to be prepared ahead of time. The police have to know what veterinarians will help them, what dog control officers and animal control officers will help them, what humane societies and animal shelters are in the area, who the rescues are. They can all assist you in cases of animal cruelty, especially when you have an animal hoarder that has like 200 animals, like in this case that I had. It was many years ago. The police need to secure the scene. They need to go in and videotape and photograph the animals. Sometimes when you have cases of animal hoarding or of neglect, you can talk to people and they might give up the animals. They might realize they're in over their head, and you can seize them and handle the case that way. There are just some animal hoarders out there that don't see the suffering, and they will not give up the animals. And you will have to get a search warrant. In this case, the Agway man was delivering food to this woman. She stopped paying him, and he stopped delivering the food. And he went there a couple times to get paid, and she had a gate around the property. She wouldn't let him in, And so he went to the police and said, these animals haven't had food in over a month. And so they checked the property as well as they could, and they got a statement from the Agway man. They got a search warrant, and a trooper called me and said, we're going to need help. And he asked me if I could come out. This was in Schoharie, so I did, and I contacted animal shelters in the area. We called animal control officers. We had 3 veterinarians. I actually had an animal shelter come from Port Jervis. And we went into the property, and we secured some of the dogs that were left there recently. People would go there and drop off their dogs without even checking the place out, just because she put the word out in the town that she never euthanized anything, and she was no kill, and everybody thought that was wonderful, and so they dropped their dogs off. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I've been around for a long time. I've worked at different shelters. I've worked with them. And this whole no-kill thing, it doesn't always work. It sounds like an ideal situation. Euthanasia is very sad, but it's not cruel. Leaving animals in a cage for years is cruel. Turning animals away, knowing they're going to die on the street, is cruel. So I know it's very difficult to have to deal with euthanasia, but when you're involved with animal welfare, it is not a fun thing. It's not going to make you happy all the time. And sometimes you have to think of what is best for this animal, not how am I going to feel at the end of the day. That never really mattered to me. So we did get the animals out that we could here. Maybe there were about 80 that we could save, but as we walked through the property, this is what we saw in garbage cans, many of them. And I'm not going to show you all the pictures, but she actually would put cats in cages when people brought them there, and as they died, because she didn't have the food, she would just throw them on top of the cage and stick another cat in. This was her cat room. And this cat came out of this crate. There was a note on that crate, feed Rusty a can of cat food in the morning and dry food at night. And there was Rusty. And this dog, we don't know how it died. We did take some of them to be necropsied so that we could show they died from starvation. This was where she lived. She lived in a trailer on the property. And when I opened the door, this little dog was there looking at me. So, she had no idea what was going on. And the woman was actually a psychologist from Long Island, and she was previously arrested in Long Island for doing the same thing. So every animal has to be identified. If you're going to take animals off a property, you can't just remove them if there's more than 1 or 2. You have to identify them. Dog number 9. Dog is very thin. It's difficult to see in this picture, and the dog has a lot of fur, but you can see his ribs showing. And this was inside her barn. Dogs in cages, dead and alive. Empty bags of dog food, and so on. Aggravated cruelty 353A is also called Buster's Law, and it's a felony, felony, and it applies to intentionally killing or serious physical injury, causing serious physical injury to a companion animal. And it is intended to cause extreme physical pain, or is done in especially depraved, or sadistic manner. So, this was a stray cat, a feral cat, and shot by an arrow. The person who did this was not an accident. He was a good shot. He knew how to shoot a bow, an arrow. So he deliberately shot this cat, and he was charged with a felony. Doesn't matter if it was a feral cat or a stray cat. It's still a felony. And this dog was found chained to a tree. The police were called. They went and they had exigent circumstances to remove the dog. The owner just didn't want him anymore, so he chained him to a tree and doused him with lighter fluid, set him on fire. There's 3 ways that we can take animals from people legally. One of them is with permission from the owner. If they don't want the animal anymore and they sign it over to a humane society or a rescue, that's fine. Another way is with a search warrant. If they are not willing to sign the animal over, then the police need to go and get a search warrant. And the other one is with exigent circumstances, and that is an emergency where something like this is happening and the police don't feel that they have the time to get a search warrant, or the animal is in such great pain that they have to remove the animal immediately. So this dog was found in a crate in this area. The owner was home. Every day, the owner saw this dog. It was near the kitchen, locked in a crate. The owner just stopped feeding the dog. The animal was laying in his feces and urine in this crate, never allowed outside the crate, never given any food or any water. The owner was letting it die slowly. A neighbor or a relative found out about this and saw the dog in this condition and called the police. They went with animal control and seized the animal. The owner gave the dog up. They brought him to a vet. He was suffering from severe emaciation, dehydration, multiple wounds from urine and feces burns, pressure sores, suffering from extreme pain, and the owner was charged with 353A. So if you have a case like this and you're not sure if it's a felony or a misdemeanor, what I used to do was charge them with both. And I would talk to the assistant district attorney who's handling the case and say, you know, this animal was every day in this cage smelling food. Dogs have a great sense of smell. They can smell probably 500 times greater than we can. So every day this dog is smelling food, he's not getting any. He's not getting any water for 2 weeks, losing weight, urinating, laying in his feces. I would say that's pretty sadistic to leave an animal in that condition. And so I would charge with both. And if they don't get indicted for the felony, then you have the misdemeanor, failure to provide proper sustenance. This case was down in Orange County. There were 10 horses. 9 of them died from starvation. The owner was a New York City policewoman, and she just let these horses slowly die from starvation. The police got a call about it. They got a complaint from somebody that was actually boarding horses in her barn. And they executed the search warrant, found 10 horses. The district attorney down there put this in the grand jury, and because they were her pets, they were not being used for any commercial purpose, he got 10 felony charges. It went to trial, and she was convicted of 10 felony charges, aggravated cruelty. And this is the only horse that lived. His name was Sheamus, and he was taken to a rescue. You can see how thin he is. Probably a 1 on the Henneke scale, and the Henneke scale is used to judge a horse's weight. 1 is the lowest number, and 9 would be the highest. And this was a month later. 1 month after this horse was given to a rescue, this is how he looked. So it comes down to they're not getting enough food, and they cannot live on grass. In New York State, the Northeast, we don't have the right kind of grass and fields to maintain horses for the most part. They need hay and they need grain, and they need their teeth floated, and some of them need minerals. And if people aren't going to do that, then they either need to give them up or have them euthanized. But you can't let them die of starvation. That causes extreme pain and suffering. The dog shelter law applies to all dogs that are kept outside, and they must have a shelter that's appropriate to the breed of dog, the weather conditions, and the shelter itself has to be properly maintained. And beginning 72 hours after the charge of violating this section, each day a defendant fails to correct the deficiencies, if you find them, it shall constitute a separate offense. So I got a call from a police officer, and he said, I have a beagle in a doghouse out here, but I don't think the shelter is proper, and I'm really not sure. I said, send me a picture. So he sent me this. I said, you're right. It's not proper. There's no lap. There's nothing covering the doghouse. It's way too big for this dog. There's no bedding, and it was very cold. It was in the wintertime in January. And so I told him, either tell him to bring the dog in, it's a very cold night, or tell him you're going to arrest him for Section 353 for not providing the proper shelter, and that the dog is a short-haired dog, and he is committing an act that could cause cruelty and suffering. And so he actually did, the guy did bring the dog in, and he did get a new doghouse. So that got settled. Another example of an inadequate shelter, and I'm sure you've all seen these things. Companion animals in hot cars, Section 353D. You know, when it's 80 degrees outside, it's probably 100 degrees in a car. Somebody's got the windows rolled up, and they got the dog in the car, and they're at the mall, and people are calling because the dog is panting, crawling under the seat. The police have the right to do anything they have to do to get the dog out of a car. If it's a very hot day, and you believe that this dog is suffering, what the law says is a police officer or an SPCA agent may take any steps necessary to remove the animal and shall not be held criminally or civilly liable. Yeah.
With that, can you answer a question in regards to the ACO gets called to the scene with that vehicle? What's the ACO's responsibility from that point on?
A dog control officer, their only job is to pick up stray dogs. They have no legal authority to do this. They are not police officers. So they would have to call a police officer and have them break the window. Or the Humane Society is here. Somebody from you would have the authority to break a window and get the dog out of the car. And you would not be held liable. It's written right in the law. Now, I had a case where a kid put a dog in a car deliberately. It was his mother's dog. He hated his mother, and he wanted to really hurt her, so he took her little dog. It was a Yorkshire Terrier, put her in the car. It was a real hot day, and we found the dog. It had crawled under the seat and died. This kid was like 14 years old. I think this was in Sand Lake years ago. So in a case like that, it would be a felony cruelty, in addition to keeping the dogs in a hot car. And it could be a misdemeanor. If the dog is showing signs of suffering, if it's a hot day and the dog is starting to, pan a lot, you're looking in there, and the owner left the dog in the car, you could also charge him with animal cruelty, in addition to this section. Animal fighting goes on all around the state. I've had several cases of animal fighting in New York, up in Washington County, in Albany County, Schenectady County, and Orange County. I've handled dog fighting cases. And I'm not going to read all this to you, but it is a felony to fight dogs, whether it's for amusement or gain, whether it's on the street or an organized fight. It's still a felony, and it's a Class A misdemeanor to own or possess any animal under the circumstances that they will be used for fighting. And it's a B misdemeanor to be a spectator at any animal fight. And it's a B misdemeanor to own or possess any implements that would be used for fighting. It may require undercover operations, and it can be called in by neighbors for barking dogs. It's often found through dog fighting magazines on the internet. You can see dogs being sold, good game dog. Game dog means trained for fighting. In the United States, the dogs that are used for fighting are almost exclusively pit bulls. I have nothing against pit bulls. I got involved with dog fighting because I cared about the pit bulls. I didn't like the way they were being abused. And they are usually kept in yards on very heavy chains to strengthen their neck muscles for fighting. They are bred as well as trained for fighting. I used to subscribe to underground dog fighting magazines, and some of the ads would be Pit Island Kennels, and they would advertise the inbred champion Mystic. Inbred is common with fighting dogs. Champion means they won 3 dog fights. Roll Hard Kennels, Grand Champion Lou Kane, bred to an inbred gringo bitch, and so on. So a grand champion means they won 5 dog fights. And they are actually recognized throughout the pit bull fighting world. They just had a big case in New Jersey. This was down in Orange County. I found this guy reading through a dog fighting magazine that I acquired through, I used the name of Cliff Johnson, and I said, I'm looking to get into the game. I got a dog fighting magazine, and I sent them a money order and started getting subscriptions under the name of Cliff Johnson. And I found this guy, James Friccione, big dog fighter. He was the publisher of this magazine, the Sporting Dog Journal, which was one of the biggest dog fighting magazines in the country. He had 64,000 subscribers. And so we ended up, after about a year of investigating this guy, we got a search warrant, went to his property, seized 20 champion fighting dogs. And each one was numbered, and the vet was there and identified all their medical conditions and so on. And we seize dogfighting paraphernalia. They usually use an electrocution device for dogs that keep losing. They will electrocute them with battery cables. These are breaking sticks down at the bottom. They use them to pry the dog's jaws off of each other and also off of the spring poles, which they hang in the trees for the dogs to jump up and exercise the jaw muscles for fighting. And that little weight collar was on a puppy just to start strengthening his neck for fighting. Now that's called a spring pole. I've actually seen them hanging in yards in Albany and Schenectady. One time there were some in Troy, and if you happen to see these things hanging in a yard, there's only one reason for them. They tie a leather or something on the end of it, and a dog will jump up and grab on, jump up and down, and strengthen their jaw muscles. And this would give you enough to get a search warrant. There's no other reason. If you see pit bulls in the yard, you would have enough to get a search warrant. We do have on our website, NYS Humane, examples of search warrants for dog fighting. Now, what they do is they lay a rug on the ground so that the dogs can dig in with their toenails when they're fighting with each other, and these rugs will usually be covered with blood. And this is a spring pole hanging. It was hanging in a spare bedroom. At the guy's house, the breaking stick was on the floor. Treadmill is commonly used as part of the training for the dogs to get them ready for a fight. And the bottom right table there is dog fighting magazines, collars, drugs, needles, hypodermic needles, and so on. And you'll usually get money and guns and drugs when you're investigating a dog fighting case. This is also endangering the welfare of a child. Abandonment of animals. The owner or possessor who abandons an animal from a dwelling or dumps it out into the street to fend for itself is guilty of a misdemeanor. If the animal has been abandoned in a house or an apartment for days, you would also charge him with Section 353 or 353A, depending on the condition of the animal. And, somebody asked me, well, how long should you let it go before you know an animal is abandoned? Well, what the law says is if animals are left without food and water for more than 12 hours, the police have the right to seize them. And that's under Section 373, which we will get to. So what I would do is just keep checking on the animal. If it's outside, fastened to a dog house, and the neighbors say nobody's been around for a couple days, I would keep checking on it. Get the phone number for the owner. We have a lot of databases. Police can get phone numbers for owners, for relatives, and so on, and find out where the people are, when they left, when they're coming back, who's feeding the dog, and so on. If an animal is left in a house, you could put a piece of tape or string across the front of the door to determine whether somebody has broken in, if they're coming or going. But if the dog has been there and it's been abandoned for a day, I would get a search warrant. Animals have to eat, just like we do, every day. I wouldn't wait 3 or 4 days before I decided to go in there. If somebody dumps an animal out in the street, whether it's a dog or a cat, they pull up in a car and toss it out the window, whatever. That is abandonment. We cannot dump cats out to fend for themselves or dogs. It is a crime. And selling diseased animals, That applies to any person who's selling or exposing them, whether it's a rescue or a pet store, or anybody who's exposing or selling any animal that has any contagious disease, and that is a misdemeanor. So if you get a puppy, or if you get a call from somebody who just adopted a puppy from the kennel up the road that's selling Labrador retrievers, and they took their puppy to the vet because it wasn't eating, and it turns out that the puppy has parvovirus, you can get go to the house, go check the breeder out, check the dogs out. You might want to bring a veterinarian with you. And, you know, if they have a dog with an infectious, contagious disease and they sold it, that in itself is a crime. And any other animals that are sick, if they're not getting vet care, that would be a crime also. Any person who willfully or unjustifiably injures, destroys, interferes, or tampers with any animal, any horse, mule, dog, or any other domesticated animal used for racing, breeding, or exhibition of skill. If the animal is interfered with in any way, injured, destroyed, or tampered with, it is a felony crime. So what do we have around here every year? The fairs, right? The Scotticoke Fair, the Washington County Fair, the Chatham Fair. A lot of animals, a lot of them are being shown. A lot of these animals cost money. If they are interfered with in any way by anybody, it's a felony crime. Horse racing. We all know horses are given drugs illegally. Most of you won't end up working on at a racetrack, but when these horses fall over and die and break their legs and everything else, they check on them. A lot of times they've been injected with drugs, and they don't feel the pain, so they're running, and the next thing you know, their leg snaps. Throwing substances injurious to an animal in a public place. Any person who throws any object that could hurt an animal in a public place is guilty of a misdemeanor. So this was in Albany. A Molotov cocktail was thrown at these horses. I think that could possibly cause an injury. These horses rear up. They could hurt each other. One of them could slip and fall. One of the police officers could be injured. You don't have to have an injury. If somebody smashes a bottle on a sidewalk where people walk their dogs, or where a dog might possibly walk, you can arrest them under this section. For the seizure of animals, the police and SPCA or any duly incorporated humane society may seize any animal lost, strayed, homeless, or abandoned in the street, road, or public place. The police or an SPCA may also seize any animal that's left for more than 12 hours and kept in a crowded or unhealthy condition, or not properly cared for, or without necessary sustenance, food, or drink. So if you know that there's a house someplace and there's a bunch of cats in there and they're not properly cared for, the conditions are unhealthy. And what does that mean? You knock on the door, they open up the door, and the smell of urine would knock you out. That's unhealthy conditions. Animals shouldn't have to live in a situation like that. So I've actually come upon these things. They won't let me in the house. I knock on the door. I said, I got a complaint. You've got a lot of animals here, and I wanted to check on them. And they open up the door, and I could smell the place, hear dogs barking. You can see in, you know that it's overcrowded, it's filthy. They say, well, I'm not letting you in the house. Okay, I'll see you later. You go and you get a search warrant, and you go back. Who may assist with the seizure of animals? Other police agencies, a humane organization, SPCAs, rescues, veterinarians, private individuals, a task force. The police can bring anybody they need to with them to execute a search warrant. Either the police or the SPCA are the seizing organization. The police would do the paperwork as far as the fingerprinting, the arrest report, and the photographing and the videotaping would go. And the Humane Society can assist, and the Humane Society would be the impounding organization. And a Humane Society can delegate rescues under their auspices to take care of the animals. Just do not allow the news media on the property. If you are investigating a case of animal cruelty, they will try to come on the property. And if they do that, they have no legal right to be there, and you can lose your search warrant. The entire scene must be photographed. Every animal should be photographed. Several pictures might be necessary. Every animal should be identified by a number. Separate information or complaints should be used for every animal. You don't put the individual is guilty of 40 counts of animal cruelty on one information. It's one dog, one accusatory instrument. If you have 100 animals, you might want to talk to the assistant district attorney to find out how many cases he actually wants to prosecute for, how many informations he wants you to write. When any person is arrested at the time of the arrest in charge of any animal or any vehicle, the police or an SPCA may take charge of the animal and vehicle and deposit the same in a safe place. We can put them any place. I've had situations where I've taken over 20 horses from people, and I put them at different horse farms in the area. Maybe 3 horses in one spot, 4 in another, and so on. If we are unable to take all the animals from the property, once we file charges against the person, we can get a court order to retain the animals on the property. If there's 50 horses on a farm that are starving to death, and as police, we have no place to put them, but we make a summary arrest, bring the guy before the judge for maybe 10 counts initially of animal cruelty, we can get a court order from the judge under Section 373 to keep going back to the property, or to designate a humane society to go back to the property. An example of the court order is on our website, nyshumane.org. Other laws that pertain to animal cruelty would be the penal law. Sexual misconduct is a Class A misdemeanor for any person to engage in sexual conduct with an animal. Endangering the welfare of a child, if the child is present during an act of cruelty. Any offense related to property. Animals are considered property. They are unique property, but they are property and they have a value. So if somebody's racehorse was poisoned or injured in some way, it might be a misdemeanor crime because it's a commercial animal raised for commercial purposes under the agriculture and market law. But if that horse is worth $5,000 or $10,000, it's going to be criminal mischief, felony, or larceny, stealing an animal. Also, the penal law, section 195.06, injuring or killing a police animal. is a misdemeanor. And also, under the Vehicle and Traffic Law, any person who strikes any horse, dog, cat, or cattle must stop and attempt to locate the owner or report the same to the police. Failure to do so constitutes a violation under the Vehicle and Traffic Law. So anything that you need as an example, we have it all on our webpage, nyshumane.org. Search warrants and accusatory instruments, copies of a court order. Just go to nyshumane.org. And there is a section under, it's a manual for police, and under that is a section that provides forms and documents for police, for veterinarians, and so on. So does anybody have any questions?